All of us have moments of leadership. These moments are characterized by clarity of a goal or direction that needs to be pursued, the communication of that vision to others, and the ability to offer the necessary support for others to join us. As parents, we exhibit these moments of leadership many times a day. As friends and loved ones, we may offer a vision or direction for another to help them navigate a challenge they're going through. And then we may stand by their side to encourage them in their bravery and commitment. And we have moments of leadership within organizations where we work with others to envision what's best for the whole and then help others step forward to fulfill that vision. One of the great mysteries of the Torah is the unfolding narrative of Moses' leadership as it takes place in this week's Torah portion. The people complain to Moses and Aaron that they don't have any water. God tells him to take his staff and speak to the water, and water will emerge, just like it did earlier in the book of Exodus. Moses and Aaron gather the people. Moses takes his staff and says, "Listen now, you rebels, shall we bring you water out of this rock?" And then Moses raised his arm and struck the rock twice with his staff, and out came copious water, and the community and their beasts drank. This was the behavior that cost Moses and Aaron their chance of leading the people across the Jordan into the promised land. God says after the incident, "Because you didn't have enough faith in me to sanctify me in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land that I have given them." After serving the Jewish people for over 40 years, dedicating his life to leading them out of Egypt, bringing them to Mount Sinai, and now taking them across the wilderness to the promised land, because of one incident, he's not allowed to cross into the promised land? The commentators disagree as to which aspect of Moses' behavior was wrong. His anger, his act of striking the rock instead of speaking to it, the implication that it was he and Aaron, not God, who were bringing water from the rock. I don't think we can find a definite reason or a definitive reason for Moses' failing here and whether he deserves the consequence that God gives to him, but we can observe his leadership, specifically the indignant way he speaks to the people. The book of Numbers details a seemingly endless litany of disheartening and infuriating moments between Moses and Israel. The people grumble constantly and often with no real reason. They complain that the food is boring. They whine that they won't be able to conquer the land. A family of Levites orchestrates a mutiny against Moses and Aaron's leadership. In each of these cases, we encounter a familiar pattern. The legitimate complaint on the part of the people elicits frustration on the part of Moses and anger and punishment on the part of God. And by the time we arrive at our chapter, we're conditioned to assume that any complaint here by the people are a sign of sinful rebellion. Every time we hear the first hint of whining from the people, we automatically assume that the people's complaint is illegitimate and the attack on Moses and Aaron is unjustified, and that God's anger and righteous judgment on the people will follow like clockwork. But this time, the situation is different. Our story begins with the narrator, not the people, informing us that when the community arrived at Kadesh, Miriam died there and was buried, and the community was without water. Even though the people expressed their all too familiar wish that they were dead or back in Egypt, the fact remains that for them, they are truly without water, and for Moses, he is truly without his sister. When Moses and Aaron hear the people's complaint, they head to the tent of meeting to await God's response, probably expecting another explosion of God's anger. And yet, God doesn't share any irritation. He simply offers instructions for how to provide the people with water. But Moses is angry, even if God is not. Is his anger in this situation just a culmination of frustration upon frustration with a people that aren't able to appreciate him or appreciate God? Has he reached his limit? When patterns of behavior emerge, it is extremely easy to fall into a trap. We assume that what is happening now is just another instance of what has happened countless times before. We too quickly conclude that the people we are dealing with are behaving as they always do, and as a result, we stop taking them seriously. As parents, How many times have we not been able to hear what our child is really saying because we've already decided that our child already says the same thing? In moments like these, when we become jaded or impatient, we lose the ability or willingness to see the uniqueness of the situation before us. When we assume that everything is familiar, we forfeit the capacity to respond appropriately in a way that God and the moment call for. The accumulated anger and frustration of 40 years bear down on Moses, and he simply cannot see or hear the people anymore. He is so incensed and so emotionally frayed that, as the Torah subtly indicated, he cannot really hear God anymore either. We also cannot ignore that at this moment, he is mourning his sister Miriam. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks suggests that this was the first trial he had to face as leader of the people without the presence of his sister. Let's recall who Miriam was for Moses. She was his eldest sister, his oldest sibling. She had watched over his fate as he floated down the Nile in a pitched basket. She had the presence of mind and the audacity to speak to Pharaoh's daughter and arrange for the child to be nursed by Moses' own mother, Yocheved. Without Miriam, Moses would have grown up not knowing who he was and which people he loved, was beloved to. Miriam is a background presence throughout much of the narrative. We see her leading the women at song at the Red Sea, so it's clear that she, like Aaron, had a leadership role. And we gain a sense of how much she meant to Moses when she gets a skin disease because of speaking negatively about Moses marrying a Cushite woman. We know that Moses cares deeply for her as he shares one of the shortest and most potent prayers we have. El na rifana la. Please, God, please heal her. Here in our portion, in this narrative, Moses faces a challenge without her for the first time. And for the first time, Moses loses emotional control in the presence of the people. And this is one of the effects of bereavement. Some people say that loss of a sibling is harder to bear than the loss of a parent, depending on the role that the brother or sister plays in one's life. And in this case, Miriam was no ordinary sibling. She was a key player in helping Moses awaken to his own Jewish identity and his place in the world, and she was his fellow leader. Rising to moments of leadership can be difficult and lonely. We can suffer deeply from doubt and uncertainty about the best direction to take. Whenever we step forward as a leader in our families, our peers, our Jewish community, or the larger world, we open ourselves up to criticism, to people who are upset by our choices and our positions. And we all need what the Rambam, Moses Maimonides, calls a chaver habitachon, a trusted friend, someone in whom you have absolute trust and can share your vulnerability. With Miriam's death, Moses had lost his trusted friend, and it's possible that God just knew that without that kind of ally, Moses just would not be able to lead the people into the land that was needed. So as tragic as the situation is, God realizes that God must find someone else, because when all is said and done, you cannot lead people that you disdain, and you cannot guide people that you can no longer really see. Moses' key quality of leadership was his empathy, his ability to have compassion for the people and to advocate for them. When each of us, because of stress, because of grief, because of anger, are not able to empathize with the people around us, it's time for us to take a break, to step back to soothe ourselves with trusted friends, to let our burdens down, and when we're ready, step forward into leadership once again. Shabbat Shalom.